Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. Today on the podcast, we're in Ohio with another Pennsylvania runner. On the track, not so much on the cross-country field, a long-time, lifetime athlete. Today on the podcast, welcome Eric, no nickname Romilly. Hi, Eric.
Hi, never had a nickname. Many have been tried, none stuck.
Let's introduce you to people with your athletic career at the very start of your life. When is the first time you remember being a competitive athlete?
Probably ninth grade. I went to a small private school, and all it was see who could run halfway across the soccer field the first.
And how did that go? Do you remember your first race?
I do. I got beat, although I thought I had won. To this day, I thought I had won.
When did you get involved in organized sports?
In 10th grade, when I transferred to high school, I knew I wanted to run track. I knew I wanted to play soccer. Soccer I had played from 4th grade through 9th grade. I just showed up, and the track coach asked me what I did. I said, well, I run. We had jumping. It was basically like a little dirt path into a sawdust pit. Best of my recollection, I jumped 14 feet in 9th grade, which wasn't very good by public school standards.
After having played soccer for several years in school, you joined an individual sport to compete, and you were immediately the longest jumper. How motivated were you by competition at that point?
I'd never thought about this before, but I was very motivated by competition. I was in 10th grade. The coach said, go long jump. He told me to go try the triple jump, which I didn't even know what it was. And we had a fella who, at least at that point in time, was perceived to be pretty good in our high school. But he was also a good guy. Norris Crampton was his name. Wow, haven't said that name since high school. He showed me how to triple jump. I entered the long jump, triple jump in the 100-yard dash. I don't remember where I finished in the 100-yard dash. I took second in both the long jump and the triple jump. You had asked me about how did competition spur me. Immediately. And this was an event I had never done, and I wanted to win. But I was also motivated by this guy on my team who I perceived at that point as being really good, and I hoped someday I could be as good as him.
Was he the same age as you or ahead?
Yeah, he was a senior.
You're just going to have him for 1 year there. Let's just talk about the environment then. So this is the early 70s. What kind of track, what kind of long jump pit, what kind of shoes, what kind of equipment do you have?
Oh, God. It was a rolled cinder track, which was never rolled as far as I know. So we used to have to sprint with those. They had to have been inch-long spikes. Gosh, that's a good point, because I remember in my freshman year, I ran in Converse All-Star high tops. The long jump pit was this really broken up macadam runway. You know, it looked like a road you'd see in West Virginia or something like that, and jumping into a sawdust pit. The pit was probably about maybe 18 feet long from the board to the end of the pit. They didn't give me track shoes until my senior year. At that point, my dad went out and bought me a real pair of running spikes.
When did your identity as a track athlete come? As soon as you started there? How long did it take for you to say, I'm a runner, I'm a jumper?
10th grade, I was pleased by my performance. And in 9th grade, I jumped 14 feet. In 10th grade, I jumped 17 foot something. I kept going up by 3. In 11th grade, I jumped 20 foot 2. And in my senior year in high school, I jumped 23.6. It wasn't until my junior year, the first year that I qualified for district championships. I think my senior year would have been completely different. I finished 4th in all 3 of my events in District 1 in my junior year, and only the top 3 went to states.
Wow.
By then, I had developed some of the nuances, if you will, of my jumping style. I was actually starting to draw crowds because of it.
Describe it. Well, how did it start?
It started with a combination of nerves and my lucky number 4. I started rocking back and forth to a count of 4. One point it progressed from a count of 4, 1 for good luck, and then 1 to go. So it ended up with being a 6-count rock. It was all just psych. You can actually see some of the same things in like Olympic caliber jumpers where they're rocking back and forth and they're clenching their fists but I started pointing at the board and doing some rather interesting stuff that drew attention to me. But again, it was not to draw attention to myself. It was to psych myself up. The reality of it is I was a 5'9" white kid. I didn't have the same physical skills that some of my competition had. I just had to do it with all motivation and psych. And I think that's what I've actually forgotten the question now.
Well, let me just ask you, did anybody else have those kind of quirky pre-jump rituals?
No, especially in high school. But after high school, I started competing with a team called the Norristown Striders in eastern Pennsylvania. By that point, I was consistently jumping between 23 and 24 feet, winning every meet. You know, we all compete within our own degree of quality, I guess you would say. But I was winning every meet. Not to the degree that I was doing it, but people started copying the rocking things and the pointing things and stuff like that. And it was, I guess I've never thought about that before. In retrospect, I guess that was, not a compliment or something like that?
I think it is. Well, how did you feel about it?
I never thought about it. I never considered the effect it was having on anybody or anything. When I put my foot on my starting distance, which was 63 feet 6 inches, my mind, it went blank to the whole outside world. It was just everything I could do to pump myself up, to convince myself that was going to be the best jump of my life. I remember there was one high school meet. I finished last jump, come out of the pit, turn around, and there's like 50 people, which was unheard of for a high school meet, gathered around the pit watching me. I didn't even know they were there, which was kind of cool, I guess.
Before we move on and talk about your senior year in track, you also played high school soccer. What was your success level in that sport? Because you weren't a cross-country runner, so you had the fall season for soccer.
I really believe that if I had chosen a sport to excel in, it would have been soccer. I was a goaltender, but I actually got more college soccer scholarship offers than track. I loved soccer. Being a goaltender, I didn't have to run very far or very long. I actually continued to play soccer. Probably 1974 was my last time in college. In the mid-1990s, I went down to Wilmington, North Carolina, and I talked to people, and they needed a goaltender on this company team that I was working for. And I started playing soccer again, and it was at a very high competitive level. I was probably the oldest adult on the team. I found out I had more drive, more aggression, and you need aggression at some point to be a good goaltender. And I find out, my God, I had more of that than I had in high school. And I attribute that back to my junior varsity high school coach, Timothy Skiles. He used to put us through some drills that were on the verge of frightening, but they taught you how to be aggressive. Between my junior and senior year, I went to a soccer camp, to the All-American soccer camp hosted by a guy from the Polish national team. Our goaltender coach was the A goaltender from Brazil. My God, I learned more in a 1-week camp from him than I had learned in my entire life. And he really taught me to be aggressive. So in my freshman year at college, in my very first game, I fractured my shoulder blade and couldn't play goaltender the rest of the year. Right at the end of the season, the doctor okayed me to go back out and play a non-goaltender position. We were playing Slippery Rock. The very first and only high ball that I ever took, somebody was clearing the ball out and it was coming to me. This Brazilian goaltender had taught us, when you're going after a high ball, you go up, throw an elbow, put your hands up, come up with your knee to hurt anybody that's coming on. And I did that, which is obviously not legal in the field. So I elbowed this kid in the head. I know my other elbow hit him somewhere, and I kneed him somewhere in the chest. Slippery Rock team started chasing me. The entire team started chasing me. because they wanted to hurt me, and I understand why. I was still in good running shape at that point. So I'm just like 3/4 jogging around the field, and all these guys are chasing me from Slippery Rock. And I remember I did like 2 laps around the field, and the one of them I ran by our coach, Vince Seltniks. He knew why I had done that. I went like this. I went, "What do I do?" And he just went, "I don't know." So I just kept running until they all quit.
Okay. We're going to switch back to the non-contact sports. Your view of yourself there in your junior year where you came close to qualifying for states in 3 events, before college offers started coming in, did you think about college? Did you think, I'm going to be a college athlete?
Yes, absolutely. While I didn't know where, and the only places that I considered or went to look at were places where I was getting scholarships from. Long story short, my sister went to a very expensive school in New Hampshire. She dropped out her senior year, and my father spent a boatload of money putting her to school. I got a soccer scholarship from the University of Connecticut. I said, what if I go to one of these schools and I get injured or I don't make the team and my father's going to get stuck paying these bills? I was not even close to being the academic scholar that my sister was. So there was always speculation on whether I'd be able to finish school. For that reason, I didn't take any of the scholarship offers. And then my mother found Indiana University of Pennsylvania. I had good grades in academics, but they also had all the sports that I wanted to play. So she enrolled me there.
I want to review your accomplishments and how you felt at that. How did you feel not making states by X+1 and 3 events? What impression did that make on you?
I was so naive. I didn't even know there were states until my senior year, when I did qualify for states, and that's when I found out I came one position away from qualifying for states in my junior year. I literally didn't know it. My high school coach, he never told us about opportunities beyond the team events, which districts was a team event. So I didn't even know there was states.
Let's talk about your senior year in track then. What was your best accomplishments?
I didn't break 10 flat until after the summer. I long jumped 23 foot 6 inches.
What about accomplishments in terms of success at meets? So what events were you doing? Were you doing the 100, the 200, long jump?
When we were in high school, you were only allowed to do 3 events. Mm-hmm. So I did the long jump, the triple jump, and the 100 yards.
What happened at the state meet?
Going into states, I was tied for the second best 100-yard time. I had the second best long jump and the second best triple jump in the state. I was expecting really big things from myself because the only guy that had a faster 100-yard dash time was, his last name was Brown. David Brown.
Earl
Brown. That's it. And he was just ridiculously faster than any of us. That guy had run a 9.6 100 yards. A guy named Barry Stebbins had the best long jump in the state. He became part of the U.S. Olympic decathlon team. And I was cruising right along. I wasn't really putting forth a lot of effort in the preliminaries, but I made it to the finals in all 3 of my events. It's actually really hurts to talk about. I was doing warm-up drills before my long jump. Barry Stebbins showed up with a hamstring wrap from his knee all the way up to his groin. And whereas you don't ever want to wish bad on anybody, I'm like, holy crap, this is the only guy in the state that's better than me. I was doing warm-up drills, and I popped all those ligaments or tendons. I'm not even sure. Some little connective tissue right at the top of my jumping knee. I was laying in the pit in pain. All I know is some guy came over and he picked me up. He carried me the entire length of the field and back to the medical area. 15 years later, I found out from my father that guy was Joe Paterno. Because back then, high school states were held, obviously, at State College.
Yeah, at Beaver Stadium. It wasn't the best track. It was an artificial black track, but it was pretty worn out, wasn't it?
I had trouble running on artificial tracks because our entire county area, they were all cinder tracks. So when I got onto a real or synthetic track, it's like my legs felt bouncy, like they were kind of out of control. I ended up taking 3rd in the long jump, 5th in the triple jump, and tied for 5th in the 100. In the 100, when the gun went off, my leg went out from under me. I actually fell down to a knee. I got back up, and then my father always told me that was the fastest he'd ever seen me run because I actually caught everybody except for Earl Brown. We all finish in like a dead heat, and somehow they assign positions. You could say you took 3 medals at high school states. It was one of the most disappointing days of my life, and I've replayed it in my head a million times since then. To this day, 40 years later, it still hurts me because I would love to go back and live that day. If I had done what I could have done or should have done, maybe, I probably would have gotten a scholarship to a bigger school. And I wouldn't have gone to Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And I wouldn't have met the friends that I met there. In some respects, I think it was almost a blessing disguised because I can't imagine going to a better environment than what I was in at IUP. Some of the friends like yourself that I met along the way.
It's an interesting take, the twists and turns that we get. Oh, it was good news. No, that was bad news. That was bad news. No, that was good news. Let's talk about university then. What about the transition to coaching? Going from being absolute top, talk about the level of coaching that you had at high school, and how did it change when you got to IUP?
I basically had no high school coaching. I hate saying that because our coach was a really good guy, and I found out later that he was a 26-foot long jumper, but yet he never worked with me. But in retrospect, I didn't give it the serious effort that he probably desired. I think he kind of at one point said, "You're on your own." So I never got any coaching from him. And then I went to college. Honestly, we didn't have a field coach either. We had a really nice guy, Roy Groves, but he didn't know anything about jumping. And all he ever told me, probably something he read in a chapter in a book somewhere, he kept saying, "Your body follows your head. Your body follows your head." That's all he ever told me. It's not that he was wrong, especially in the triple jump. If I had had good coaching, I think that should have been my best event, but it wasn't. I never had any coaching, and so much I didn't learn until way after the fact, until I was watching Olympians and Ron Livers, that so much of triple jumping is maintaining the momentum. And I was trying to jump as far as I could on the hop, which, yes, killed my step and my jump. Would have liked to have seen what I could have done if I had had like a jumping coach in college.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about track then. You came into rivalries and competitors on the same team and at different schools. Talk about your rivals in college.
In college, my only rival was really Ron Steele. I never beat Ron in the 100 meters. I was always 1/10 or sometimes 2/10 of a second behind him. Never could beat him. What was funny about that, 30 years later, I came to the realization, you know what? He was better than you. I wasn't making excuses for getting beat by him, but I always thought I was as good as him. One day, it's like I was talking to somebody about it. I said, you know what? No, he was better than me.
Did having someone better than you help your performance, you think?
It gave me a desire to beat him. It didn't make me any better. I actually think at that point I was as good as I could get.
Right. What was your best accomplishments, you think, in college?
Freshman year, I took second in the long jump and second at the triple jump at our Pennsylvania State Track Championship. And I thought that was pretty cool. Even though the previous records sucked, I set records in both the long jump and the triple jump, school records, even though they still at that point weren't that great. And this will be another emotional moment for me. It was in my senior year. I had hurt my back. I couldn't jump. I couldn't do anything. They decided at an indoor meet in University of Pittsburgh to let me long jump. And that was a really neat place because although they had a nice track up above, the jumping area was down sort of in a basement. It was dusty. The approach was good. The pit was good. Remember, there was a single light bulb hanging out over the pit. It was like a freaking target. I mean, it was way up higher than you could reach, but it was like this target that you could jump to. But I jumped close to 24 feet. I beat a lot of big competitors in that event, and that qualified me for indoor nationals. So I went to indoor nationals in Greensboro, North Carolina, and the only 2 people that qualified were me and Jim Wooding. Jim Wooding went on to become a USA Olympic decathlon, and he finished 7th in the 1984 Olympics. I was jumping, actually not jumping very well, to be honest with you. I think I made it to the finals. They took 12 people to the finals, and I think I was in 11th place. Getting ready for the finals, and deja vu, high school all over again. I'm warming up for the finals, and on my last damn pop-up, that's where you just kind of take like a 3-step and try to pop up as high as you can. I did the same thing to my other leg. Bam, bam, bam. Little muscles around my knee. I go back into the training room. It wasn't a whole lot they could do, but they put this big wrap on me that went from halfway up my thigh down to somewhere in my calf. And you got 6 jumps in the final. I didn't improve my distance. And it was the last jump of the finals. This is hard to say. Up at the approach, put my toe down on my start line, and all of a sudden this thing in my head just went, said, Eric, what are you doing? This is the finals of indoor national. Who gives a crap whether or not you compete in the outdoors again? I ripped my leg wrap off, got myself pumped up to the nth degree. I don't know if any of you know who Bob Beamon was in Mexico City when he broke the world record by like 2 feet. That was my Bob Beamon jump. I was in the air and I knew right then, I said, I've never been this high in my life. There was just something different about that jump. And I came down in the pit. I mean, this was all really quality stuff there. And they had foot markings on the side of the concrete. You know, there was a little concrete barrier around the sand. I was well out over 25 feet. And I turn around, and the referee is holding up the red flag, saying I fouled. Both my coaches, they're both in the stands going ballistic. I had a pair of Puma jumping spikes on that had tons and tons of little rubber knobbies. And the one referee says you fouled by half of a rubber knobby.
Wow.
I just went out into the infield and started to cry. I remember rolling up into a little ball and crying because I knew I'll never do that again. There was 2 referees marking fouls at the pit, and I know that this guy's intent was to make me feel better, but the other judge came up over me and he was patting me on the shoulder and he says, son, I don't think you fouled.
Wow.
That made me feel worse.
Yeah.
In the end, I ended up taking 11th place, which some might say is good just to get there. I would not have won. There was a guy that jumped over 26 feet, like in Mississippi or an Arkansas school. I might have finished second. I definitely would have finished third. That was my only shot at becoming an All-American. So what's kind of funny is 2 of my perceived greatest moments were also my 2 biggest disappointments. Both of those haunt me to this day.
Yeah, it sounds like it's emotional just to relive it. Thanks for talking about those. It's interesting. The moments to you, if I just think about what you're saying, the results are not what you wanted. In one case, it was your best performance of your life, but it didn't count. In the other one, your performances weren't your best, but it was the stage and the timing and the nature of track and field, and you don't get points for what you do in practice or what you do all year. It's in the moment on the day, and things can go any way. So it raises the stakes and puts an enormous amount of pressure on. It's great that those moments are still vivid with you. How long did it take you to grieve that and initially let go of it?
I was going to say, I'll let you know when it happens. Anytime I talk about my track, my life in that arena, those memories just come flooding back, and they hurt today as much as they hurt then.
That's a way to go through life, to have meaningful moments. They're not always sweet, but they're meaningful and memorable. Let me switch back to some other topics. A little bit lighter, I think, will be with you. Let's talk about being a student athlete. How I have some inside information on this, but I've talked with people that say being a year-round college athlete is almost a full-time job, and we have to balance out. You have to make grades. You have to make the minimum GPA to be eligible. How did you handle scholastic requirements to be able to compete?
You're setting me up here, Matt.
I'm just asking the question.
I had a philosophy going into college. I said, I will graduate. I pretty much achieved the bare minimum to do that. Turns out I was really good in computer stuff and not so good in my major stuff. Every semester, I scheduled my classes where it's like, I'm going to do good in this one. I'm going to do bad in this one. They're going to average out to something that'll make me eligible to run track. It wasn't until my senior year that I actually got kind of serious about academics. grades, floated by for the first 4 years, just did the minimum that I needed to get by academically.
Okay, I also want to talk about the culture of running in the 70s, college in the 70s. I always think it was a great time to be in your teens and your 20s, a great time to grow up. There's a lot of transition happening in the world and the culture, but cross country and track were not the biggest sports. There wasn't the Diamond League. You were part of the track team, which didn't put you as a member of the cross country team, which was a big informal fraternity. So how did you fit in with the cross country team at IUP, which was a big unified bunch of people running at the same sport?
Cross country team was a very close-knit group of people who ran together and studied together and partied together. The sprinting and the jumping team were anything but that. In my freshman year, we took a trip down to Florida. There was 2 vans, and they were only taking like a select group of people. It was way, way less than the entire team. I think there was only 3 of us freshmen that made the traveling squad, and that was Jim Wooding, Ron Steele, All-American in mile relay, and myself. It wasn't hazing by any stretch of the imagination, but we were the freshmen. They were the upperclassmen. And when it came time to get on the vans, the sprinting and field team van was full. In their mind, they banished me, Wooding, and Steele to the cross country, the distance van. And that's when I found out this was the greatest group of people that I've ever known in my life. The camaraderie, the support, just the friendship. It was amazing to me. I had never experienced anything like that in my life. I started hanging out with the cross country team. And I was lucky enough that they, at least to some degree, let me into their fraternity.
Who were the elders, maybe the seniors on that trip?
Abbott was there.
Bob Costello, yeah.
I think Kim Burke was there. There was like 12 people there. And usually I've got a good photographic memory for that sort of thing, but I really can't remember it. Danny Friedrichs was there. Uh-huh. And some of the seniors were there, that Skip Ronan or that sort of type person. I guess I'm at a little bit of loss to really give you a list of people who were there. Regardless, they let me in. Mm-hmm. Driving down, oh God, we just did stupid stuff, stupid games, stupid conversations. And I'm a little bit stupid, so I fit right in. Wow. And again, I'm thinking about things that I've never thought about before. That one event had as much impact on my life as anything else, because it gave me a group of friends that I probably wouldn't have had otherwise. The only friends that I communicate with still from college, they're all cross-country runners. They were my best friends. They were in my weddings, plural. They're still my best friends.
Yeah. Seems to be the nature of the thing with the camaraderie that forms. Cross country then, and even road running, was just coming into the public psyche as being acceptable. So sometimes people seen on the roads were weirdos out running. Did you ever train and run with the cross country team on more gentler, non-training type stuff?
One time, Andy and I were running, and for some reason, there was a 6-foot stone fence that Andy and I decided to jump over. We jumped over the fence of the summer home of ex-President Richard Nixon, at which we were greeted by a couple guys wearing all black, who were nice to us and told us where we were. And probably because of our naivety or, fresh young faces or something like that, they pretty much told us to jump back over the wall and never come back again.
So you don't know if Richard Nixon was actually there, but it was his house.
Correct.
Okay.
We can pretend.
Yeah. So you've had, obviously, a lot of these experiences, and competition has been something that you thrived on through that. What of these experiences and being an athlete for the full time of college, managing to graduate, what from competition did you take forward? Do you think it changed you, competition in college? How did that affect? You mentioned in your later life, in the 1990s, playing with more ferocious aggressiveness while you're playing soccer. So you remained an athlete doing lots of different things. How do you think the competition or lessons of competing and those traumatic events affected you in other areas of your life?
That is a very good question. And until right at this moment, I've never considered. But I can absolutely tell you, most of the people that might likely watch this podcast might know us, or which is why I decided to drink a beer so people would recognize me. I was an underachiever in college, both academically and athletically. When I got out and I got my first job computing from day one, once somebody said, I'm going to give you a chance to get into the industrial automation group, from day one, I wanted to be the best there was. I studied more in the next year than I studied in all of college. I studied books. I read everything I could about what it was that I was trying to accomplish. I learned nuances of programming languages. Wow, that's really kind of interesting to think about. And like I said, all I knew is I wanted to be the best programmer in that group. I became the best programmer in that group.
The feedback that you get is completely different. In track, you can look at the clock, you can look at the tape, you can look at the finish tables. In the real world or the post-college athletic world, your feedback is different. How long did it take you to reach an acceptable level, and what kept driving you? You wanted to be the best. At some point you thought, okay, I'm on the right track, or I've arrived. And then what is your motivation after that? And how is the confirmation or the feedback that you've done that?
The confirmation came from my peers. My first real job, once I had developed a good set of skills and I left the steel mill and I went to work for a small automation house, the confirmation came from my peers. I knew I was doing a good job, but they all acknowledged that I was doing a really good job. And then when I left that automation house and I started contracting, which is what took me to the beautiful city of Cleveland, the same thing kept happening. I was noticed. It was really rewarding because people were acknowledging the job that I was doing. And that felt really good to me, especially because I was just such a goof off in college and stuff. And once I got out into the real world and you talked about that competitive nature, it truly came out in me. As a result, I've had a pretty good career. And I think a lot of that has to do with, again, first time I'm thinking about this, a lot of that had to do with my competitive nature of wanting to be the best.
It's interesting. It seems that there might be, see if you agree, something to this in terms of when one sets high expectations, maybe the highest expectations, there's the biggest risk. Obviously, you've had experiences where things turn different and twisted different ways. You can look back on them now and say things, I'm glad this happened. Still not glad that happened. Is there a risk in that kind of self-goal setting, or what happens when you, again, even on a shorter term, don't meet your own expectations? How does that competitive drive impact that?
Interesting question. And my answer is going to sound a little bit egotistical. I never failed. Once I was in the computing world, I never had a project overrun. I was pretty good at it. The job that I just retired from, the guy that's my manager, who used to be my
soup colleague.
Thank you. At my going away party, he made me cry. He said that there was no one else that I would have ever wanted to work with. He said he never had to worry about any system that I worked on. And to get that compliment from him, it almost justified my entire post-college career and said, my God, I met my goals. I never really set any goals for myself per se, except to be the best that I could be. To this day, I really believe that I achieved those. So I think my achievements in my post-college career far exceeded any achievements that I had in athletics.
Yeah, interesting. The drive and your personality carried you through that. Have a think about, were there other people like you? Did you feel that other people during your college time had the same drive, had the same motivations, whether their successes were the same?
No, I think the entire cross-country team had much more drive than I had. Sprinters like a Ron Steele, a Jim Wooding, Donnie Friedline, rest in peace. Actually, a host of others. Say Steve Shunk. They had a drive to be the best. I had a drive to be the best, but it didn't filter down to my practices. my workouts. I never lifted weights. I never did crap. I just kind of flew by the seat of my pants on natural ability. Again, this is another one of those things that I didn't understand at the time, but in retrospect, I look back on some of those people, the Wooding, Steele, and those people. They paid their dues. I don't think I ever paid my dues. They put in the hard work and the practice, and oh my God, it paid off. Ron Steele, All-American, Shunk, All-American, Jim Wooding, 1984 Olympics. There's a big part of me that says, what if I had had the same motivation to work out as hard, to be as committed as they were? And that goes for like almost the entire cross-country team too. I always wonder, what if?
Sure.
I know I could have been better than I was. Zero question in my mind, I could have been better than what I was.
You were competing at a high level and winning most of your meets. Did you run into any serious athletes that were at that time that came across your meet?
I competed against Carl Lewis.
How'd that go?
I beat him. I beat Carl Lewis in the long jump. It's one of my claims to fame.
Really?
Of course, if you put into perspective that he was in 8th grade and I was a senior in
Okay.
that might alter your perception of that a little bit. But nonetheless, I beat Carl Lewis in the long jump.
Was he obviously going to be a great jumper at that point? Could you tell?
Well, I knew he was a great sprinter because he beat me in the 100.
You got beaten by an 8th grader.
Yes, I did.
That's brilliant. Wow.
Yeah.
And he was afraid to take you on again after that? Is that the story?
Well, we never met again.
This is another maybe tough topic. Running in the 70s community lost an All-American, a master marathoner in Don Bushy Friedline. Gone now.
Yeah.
He's part of the community who was running in the 70s. We just lost him. You were friends with Bushy. What do you remember about Donnie Friedline?
He was this crazy mixture of a person who he had a personality bigger than life.
Yeah.
He could do everything good. I went to his funeral or ceremony. Of course, people were talking about him. And they were talking about one of the classes, human anatomy. I took it also. It was a very difficult class because it was just memorization out the yin yang. So he'd be like in the library studying this stuff, and people were going like, Donnie, you're a phys ed major, He like scored 100% on every test. So academically, he was great. Athletically, he had a drive that just impressed the hell out of me. I don't know how good he was in high school. He became a better person. His work ethic was just second to none. That's one of those things I wished I had had. Donnie was a good guy. Just all around good guy. He knew how to train hard. He knew how to study hard. He knew how to party hard. And it was like somehow he melded all those things into one college experience. God bless him for that.
That's a nice tribute.
About the spirit of competition. We had a meet in Fairmont, West Virginia, and there was a fellow there whose name I will never forget, Terry Creamer, who ran for West Virginia University, and he was a long jumper. And he apparently knew me, and I apparently knew him. I always talked to my competition before an event. Can't really tell you why I did that, but I always did it. And I talked with him before my event. I don't remember who was better, but he and I had very similar PRs at that point. I was running the 200 meters in college, and it always interfered with the long jump. The track, we had to wear a certain size spike, which was different than the spike that we had to wear for jumping. And you couldn't jump in the spikes that you wore for sprinting. I finished the 200 meters, and they were calling last call. Last call, Romilly, you're on deck, getting ready to jump. I didn't have my jumping spikes with me. I don't know why, but they were probably in my gym bag, and I probably left it somewhere. I didn't have my jumping spikes with me. And this guy, Terry Creamer, comes up to me. He says, what size shoe do you wear? And I told him we had the exact same shoe size. He took his spikes off and he gave them to me. He gave them to me knowing that one of us was going to win this competition. Yet he gave me his spikes. And I jumped And I beat him, not by much, but I beat him. That's a story that's never left me to this day. I think about this guy all the time. I've tried to find him online because I've always wanted to say thank you to him.
This is Matthew. I've come back in to edit this. I found Terry Creamer on LinkedIn and on his All-Star Karate website and put Eric in touch with him.
How much more of a noble thing can you do to help the only person that you know might beat you? And he did that, and that's a story I'll never, ever forget.
It's a tribute and an honor to the value of competition.
Spirit of competition, yes. Time I got to my senior year in the Philadelphia area, I was one of the better sprinters. It was the Benai Brith Junior Olympics. They had a 6-lane track. Through the trials and the preliminaries, 7 people qualified for the finals. Sort of a tribute to my dad also, which will make me cry. 7 people had to go to the finals. So what they did is they just adjusted all the starting blocks. So 7 of us ran on a 6-lane track. And I have to say this because it's part of the story. It was 6 black guys and myself. And my dad, who was my biggest fan, he was up in the stands near the finish line. There was a couple guys sitting in back of him. He heard them over say, "What chance does that white kid have?" And my dad turned around and said, "Watch him, he might surprise you." Well, to this day, I believe I jumped the gun and didn't get called. Either I got the best start of my life or I jumped the gun. The end of that story is I won the event. As I'm running down the track, my dad is jumping up and down screaming. He said the guy tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Any chance that's your son?" My dad turned around and said, "You're damn right he is."
How would you like, if you were writing a little 1 paragraph on how you would like people to remember you or get insights to you? What's the people who ran with you in the 70s? What would you like them to remember about Eric Romilly?
Oh my God. You have just delved into a very different topic, a very thought-provoking topic. What would I want them to remember me? I honestly don't care if they remember anything about my so-called athletic achievements. I just hope people remembered me as a good guy, a friendly guy. I really think that's it. I think I was perceived in college as being a lot of things that I really wasn't. A good guy, a good friend.
Your great storytelling, personal insights, and tributes to other people. I know you very well. It's clear you are a good guy and a good friend. Thanks for sharing your stories. Thanks for sharing your time. I hope this was pleasant, fun. I know some parts were emotional for you, but thanks for your time and reliving running in the 70s.
You brought out thoughts and associations between my athletics and my life. You asked me questions that brought out things that I've quite frankly never thought of.
There was just a lot about that whole time frame that we have in common that may inform how we all look at the world today. So there's that.
I've always thought the 70s were the best years of my life. High school and college, all through the 70s. Just memories that will burn in me till the day I die.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.